Hello and welcome to Mountain Patriot Homestead. If you're like most of us, you're always looking for ways to watch that budget, to save a little money, and still be able to put good meals on our tables, because it seems like the first place that many people start cutting is their food budget. Now, if you are like me and you don't have to do a lot of meat shopping at the store, you may get a little bit of sticker shock when you walk down that meat aisle. I know that I do, and just looking at this week's ads is enough to put me just into a very big state of blessings and thankfulness that we have the meats that we have here on our farm that we can harvest. But what if you don't have the capability of doing that? What if you have to purchase your proteins, your meats from the store? Well, for some people, that may be extremely difficult to do, but not impossible. And let me show you, today we're going to talk about using something that a lot of times is underutilized. People overlook it because they're not really sure what to do with it. So let's take a look. Now, what I'm talking about is canned meat. Yes, I know it may not sound the most appetizing in the world, but actually canned meats, I know pretty much everybody is familiar with tuna, mackerel, salmon, the fish products. However, did you know that there's quite a few meat products, pork, beef, chicken, that are also canned? Now, you may not know it, but our grandmothers and mothers did know it, because a lot of that stuff ended up in casseroles. Casseroles were a way to stretch food to feed multiple people. I don't know how many people your mothers and grandmothers had in their families. I know on my daddy's side of the family, there were 10 kids. On my mama's side of the family, there were 10 kids. So a lot of mouths to feed. So those casseroles that get made fun of today fed large families back then. So, and let me clarify. I know that not all of our families eat canned meat out of the stores. My family, for the most part, raised food, but there were times that those tuna casseroles that you just don't see on tables anymore, those were big things back then. And I know I've eaten a number of tuna casseroles and all different types of casseroles, even from the meats that we raised, because a little bit of meat feeds a lot of people. But anyway, back to canned meat. Now, this, you may look at this and go, ugh, pork with juices. What does that mean? Well, juices are broth, okay? And when this was canned, let me show you the ingredients, because something that a lot of people automatically assume is that when you buy something in a can like this, it's going to have a ton of preservatives and it's not going to be good for you, all of that. Let me show you the ingredients. If you can read right there, 2 ingredients, pork and salt. Salt is a preservative, and so that's all that's in here is pork and salt. And if you're watching your salt intake, you may be concerned about, oh no, how much salt is that going to be? Well, out of a serving, it says there are 150 milligrams of sodium in here. If you stretch that out into a whole recipe, it's going to be even less. If you drain the juices off of this, even less. So, you know, don't be turned away by the fact that you've got meat in a can, because I know that's not, it didn't grow out in the field in a can, but Neither did that stuff on a styrofoam tray out of the grocery store. So, today we're going to be making a recipe using this canned pork. To give you an idea, a jumping off place, if you see this in a store or something similar, it may be chicken, it may be beef, maybe give you some ideas on what you could do to prepare this. Now, I'm not going to, I failed to look up. I will have it, I will put it right here on the screen whenever I edit this video and tell you how much I found this for at the store online. I paid, I think it was $1.29 is what I paid for it, because I got it at the Benton Dent, which is a little salvage food store, but it's in date. It's well within that Best Buy use date that frightens so many people into not buying stuff, but it's in date, and $1.29 for, what is it, 1.5 pounds. And I know some of this is the juice that's in it, but we're not just going to throw that juice away either. So let's get cooking. Alright, this white that you see on top, it's not molded. That is the fat that's congealed. And we are just going to drain this out here. There you go. Now, if you don't, if for whatever reason you can't handle this white, you can remove it, but that is fat and that is flavor. But what we're going to do, see all that juice in the bottom? That's juice from the pork as it was processed, and that is so full of flavor, and we're going to use that for one of the ingredients for our meal today. So don't toss this unless you don't want to do that portion of it, but I'm going to show you how you can use this and stretch this meal even further. And this is just some home processed lard. You could use your favorite oil, butter, just whatever you would like. If you use butter, I would suggest putting some oil in with it, because you know butter tends to brown and those butter fats can burn. Because we're going to be cooking some potatoes and onion, and you know, if you're familiar with frying up some potatoes, it does take just a little bit, especially depending on how large your pieces of potatoes are, and you don't want your butter to burn. But this is just some lard that I've got in there, just a couple of tablespoons or so. Just getting that melted in there. Now, the amount of potatoes and onions that you use, or any other type of vegetables that you decide to throw in this dish, is going to depend on how many people you're feeding. If you want to feed a larger number of people, or if you want to have leftovers, just add more potatoes or onions or whatever vegetable that you're putting in there. So I'm just going to add, I've got about 3 medium-sized potatoes that I've just kind of cubed up here. Just going to add them in there. Now normally I would add my onions at the same time, but these are onions that I have had in the freezer that I froze after the last harvest, and you know, I don't need to cook them quite as long because they're already soft. So I am just going to add them once the potatoes are almost done. I'll add them in there to just give them a little bit of browning. So now we've just got to wait a little bit for our potatoes to cook. As you can see, the potatoes have started browning, and I'm just going to come right in here and add in my onion. As I said before, this recipe is just a jumping off point for your own ideas of how you can use canned meats in recipes. Of course, you could take this same canned pork, you could add barbecue sauce and make sloppy joe type sandwiches out of it. You could fry them up into patties by adding just a few simple ingredients. And it's endless on how you could use this, but today we're just basically making a hash out of this. You know, it would be good in tacos, or just depends on what seasoning you're going to use to flavor it up with. What is your favorite flavor profiles? What do you like? Spaghetti. You could use this in spaghetti. So there's so many different ways that you could use this meat. Tell me what your favorite profiles when it comes to food is. Do you like Italian food, Mexican food, Chinese food, American food, comfort food? Just what do you like? Let me know down in the comments. How would you use this meat? Now I'm going to come in here and add in the meat. And I'm going to include that fat in there because I know that that is going to be flavor. It is going to melt. You're not going to see it once it's done. You may not be a pork person. You may not like pork at all, but maybe you eat beef or chicken. Same thing. You could use this dish for that as well. I'm just going to put that right in there and let that start heating up. And that flavor just getting off into those potatoes. Now I know this meat is already fully cooked. You could actually eat this directly out of the pan. I'm not kidding with you. It's already completely cooked. It's processed. It's fine. I tasted of it before I added it to the potatoes because I wanted to see exactly how salty it was. This meat is not salty at all. So remember I told you that there were only 2 ingredients in here. One was salt and one was pork. Well, I'm telling you, I didn't taste any salt. So the salt has to all be in the brine, or not the brine, the broth. I will taste it as well before I use it. But I'm going to come in here because, you know, potatoes like salt. So do I. So I'm just adding little sprinkles of salt in here because I do not want bland food. If you have a health condition that requires you to watch your salt intake, then by all means adjust that to your preference because I don't want anybody out there sick. So you do what you need to do. I'm also going to come in here and just add some black pepper. Again, use your flavor preference. If you don't like any of this, then don't use any of it. Use your own seasonings. That's some red pepper flakes. You know how I am with my red peppers, so some red pepper flakes. Now, anytime I can get away with it, especially if I'm frying up some potatoes, I love me some rosemary. So I'm just throwing me a sprinkle of rosemary off in there. Daddy always made fun, said that Mama put rosemary in a lot of stuff too, and he always called them pine needles. Said he'd always joke with us kids about your mama went out in the woods and raked up leaves and pine needles and threw them in the food, because she'd use a lot of bay leaves and rosemary, so he would joke around about that. Just a little sprinkle of parsley. And one last thing that I can't forget. I'm surprised I don't smell like this stuff, and I may. Sorry for the shadows, folks, but I've got to get me some garlic off in there. I'm just going to stir all of that up in it. That smells good. It smells really good. Now from this point on, again, all of this is preference. When you're cooking in your kitchen, you make stuff the way you like it. And from this point on, just depending on how crispy you want everything, depends on how much longer you let it cook. Because again, the meat's already done. Your potatoes, they're done. That's why I've added the other ingredients. And I could take it out and eat it just like it is. But I tell you what, I want, or I would like, for that meat to get just a little bit of crispiness on some of it as well. Do you like any crispy parts? Now, if I'm eating steak or whatever, I'm a rare, medium rare girl. That's with steaks. But when it comes to pork, you know, I want my pork done. I don't eat my pork raw. And of course, this is not. It's already cooked. But I don't mind me some crispy on pork. So I'm just going to let that cook for just a little bit. And then we're going to finish up this recipe. Alright, we've got the pork and potatoes dished up. Now to just finish off this recipe. Now I'm not bothering getting out another pan. I'm going to just use this same pan that we cooked the rest of it in. And I'm going to see all that flavor there in the bottom. That's all flavor, okay? So I am just going to add some more lard back in there. Again, use butter, oil, whatever you prefer. Whatever you normally like to use to make gravy with, or roux, or sauces. But I'm just going to use some of this lard. This pan's still pretty warm, so just getting all that flavor off the bottom there. And I told you that I was going to taste that the juice that come off of that pork. I did, and it doesn't taste salty either, so it really does not have much salt in it at all. But you taste for yourself and make sure that it suits your taste. But I've just added some all-purpose flour in here. Equal amounts of lard and flour, or oil and flour, just whatever you're using. Just kind of moving that around. I don't think I eyeballed my lard very good. I think I actually got more flour than lard. So, we'll come right back here. Just add a little more. Now, don't get all excited or disturbed when things in the kitchen don't go exact. Especially if you're not measuring. And I rarely measure. I know some of you get aggravated at me because you're wanting to write down exact amounts, and I just kind of put a little of this and a dab of that, a pinch of something else, and just put it all together. But that's the way I was pretty much taught to cook, and pretty much how I taught my kids to cook. And as I've said before, some of this stuff just turns out into happy little accidents every time I cook, because not everything turns out exactly like I'm expecting it to, but there have been very, very few things in my many years of cooking that I've had to throw out. Now, depending on what part of the country you're in or what part of the world you're in, what I'm doing right here may be called different things. Down south of here, they'd call this a roux. And I can keep going with this until it gets dark if I want it dark, or I can leave it light, just whatever you prefer. But what I am going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to season this up, because like I said, there wasn't no seasoning in that juice. I'm going to season this up a little bit, and I'm adding it to this part of it because I want that salt to dissolve. I do not like to bite into something that's gritty. I've eaten enough grit when I've worked in places where there was blowing sand, and I do not like biting into something that crunches like that between my teeth. So. Okay, now I'm going to add the juice in, so let me go grab it. There really wasn't very much juice that come out of that pork, so I'm coming back in and I've added a little water to that juice. Now you could come in there and you could add milk, you could add broth, just whatever you want to use to thicken up your gravy. Now you've seen that I switched over to a whisk. That's how I keep my gravies from getting lumpy. And some of you may have some other kind of trick, but I figured out that that works best for me. And yes, I'm adding some more flavorings in with my gravy here. And I've got this on a low heat because I don't want it cooking too fast and getting too lumpy. I don't want it getting lumpy at all, but just in case. So I've got that low and slow because I would just as soon it be a palatable gravy and not one you eat with a fork and knife. Alright, I have just about got this where I want it, because I want a thinner gravy for this rather than a thick gravy like I normally prefer over my biscuits. But now, again, this is an example of what you can do rather than throwing that away, that juice that come out of there, rather than throwing that away. This could make a whole other meal if you had biscuits with it and make biscuits and gravy. Yes, it's not your typical biscuits and gravy, but, you know, if you're trying to figure out ways to stretch meals, typical is not the way to do it. So, I am going to pull this off the heat, and we're going to serve it up. And here it is. From a $1.29 can that I paid for it of canned pork, some potatoes that was almost past their prime, and some onions that I had frozen and put in the freezer last year. which is how you freeze most stuff. I have got a meal here that, see my bowl here? Look at all that food that's left. I could feed a number of people, even hungry people, off of this one can. And like I said earlier, if you have more people, you just add more potatoes or whatever. And this meat here, another option is you could take those potatoes, you could have made mashed potatoes, and you could have fixed this meat in the gravy and put the meat gravy over the mashed potatoes. That's another option. But speaking of gravy, let's get some of that on here. I could have put that gravy right on top of the meat and potatoes and mixed all of that in, but my husband may prefer it not to be on his and him just eat it just plain. So I'm leaving it separate, that way everybody can do what they want to do. And if there's more gravy left over, I'll put that aside and we may have it with add some sausage to it and make sausage gravy for tomorrow morning. So here we go. That's pork and potato hash. That's the best name I can come up with. If you have a better name for it, you let me know down in the comments. What do you think of this type of a meal? Would you eat it? Would you at least give it a try? Or would you take that meat and use it in some other dish? What kind of dish would you use it in? But let's give this a try. Get some gravy in there and meat and potatoes and onions, and let's just try it. Okay. Set me down with a piece of cornbread and this stuff, and I would eat it very often, especially in the wintertime, because boy, that has like a whole fall winter type vibe going on. Yeah. Yes. It's worth the $1.29 and then some, because when I see those prices, thankfully I'm blessed and don't have to pay them right now. I have before, and may very well in the future have to pay those high meat prices. But canned meat is an option. It's a delicious option, and read those labels because it may be more nutritious than you think. So give this a try. This is very good. I like it. Try it and tell me what you think. I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna finish this up. But I love y'all, and I hope you come back again real soon. Mountain Patriot Homestead, signing out.